I think on trust, the most important thing is to look at the record of the individual. In my case, my record at the Crown Prosecution Service. I arrived there and said we need to reform, and I reformed. I went to Northern Ireland.
But do you think there's
I went to Northern Ireland and said we would change the police service in Northern Ireland to make sure that both communities had
do you acknowledge,
respect.
So
and I changed the Labour Party.
If you've done something as in CPS where you followed through on promises, why is there a trust gap between you now as Labour leader and the public?
I think going to the CPS and following through on what I said I'd do was important. Looking at the Labour Party and seeing that I've changed the Labour Party. And I think that if you now were to ask people, why are you now inclined to think about voting Labour where you didn't just a few years ago, most people would say because it's a changed party.
Okay, so
and that's my mission.
I think that this is pertinent for you because you said in that speech it's disrespectful for Sunak to say the economy turned the corner when taxes are higher. But isn't it also disrespectful when you promise people, for example, to raise income tax for the top 5% of earners, and then you ditch that when you get nearer to power? Now, there might be good reasons for that, but doesn't acknowledging that you have broken some of the promises you made go some way to fixing these trust issues that you have?
I think it's
You've just totally avoided that.
Let me take that head on, because there are a number of pledges I made when I was running for Labour leadership. Most of those are still in place. They're the building blocks of what we've now put in place. Some of them have changed. And this is an issue that's important, because the reason they've changed is because we can't afford to do them anymore. I said that we should abolish tuition fees. We can't, now the damage has been done to the economy, particularly by Liz Truss.
You could raise taxes.
It is not possible to do that.
You could raise taxes on the top 5%, and you said you're not. I don't really want to get into the policies. What I want you to acknowledge is that part of the trust issue is also about things you said as Labour leader.
I totally disagree with you, and I'll tell you for why. I think it's more important to stand in front of the electorate and say, I'm sorry, I can't now afford what I said before because of the damage that's been done to the economy.
Why can't you afford to raise taxes for the top 5% of earners?
This is not to simply stick with something which you know you can't afford.
Well, you can afford to raise taxes on higher earners, can't you?
What I'm saying to the electorate is this. I'm going to tell you in advance of the election what I don't think we can afford to do. I'm not going to tell you that you can have everything and then break a promise after the election. I'm going to level with you now. There are some things that we now can't afford because of the damage done to the economy. I think that is basic honesty with the electorate.
You used this speech to talk personally about what shaped you, to better explain your politics. You said a while ago, voters are entitled to ask who you are and where you come from, but you don't like it. What's difficult about that for you?
Well, because a lot of my sort of formative years were about issues like my mum being very ill, very personal, difficult. I spent many hours in high dependency units with my mum, not knowing whether she was going to make it through. As a teenager, I found that really hard. I found it really, really hard. And you may think, other people may think that's the easiest thing to go on national television and talk about. For me, it wasn't. It was really difficult.
Your sister Katie actually said, I've always been quite open about my feelings. Keir's good at most things, but not that.
I think she's probably spot on. She knows me pretty well.
And it's also clear from your biography that your dad loved you, was proud of you, that he kept that scrapbook of your achievements in the back of a cupboard, which you found once he died. You also said that he was undemonstrative and unemotional. I think it's fair to say at times you have seemed a bit uneasy in public about emoting, you know, what we just talked about. Do you think that's part of your dad's legacy for you?
I don't think that's right. I think I am different to my dad, and I think anybody who knows me would be clear about that. I think, just in defence of my dad, if I may, I think he channeled all of his emotion into his support for my mum. When he took that vow, when they got married, to look after her in good health and ill health. That was absolutely through his heart. He put everything into supporting my mum, and he didn't have the emotional space, I don't think, for anything else, and for us as children. I wish it had been different, but I do, in defence of him, understand.
When you spoke about the Wolverhampton couple out there, you seemed genuinely angry. Is all of this part of you coming out of your shell?
When I was with that couple in Wolverhampton, I felt really angry. Because it's a big thing to think you're going to move on to another house, want to have another child. These are big decisions in life. They're about this sort of sense of going forward in life, which is one of the main drivers. And suddenly that was halted and pushed back and then taken a big decision. I felt emotional, I felt angry, and I think that I wanted to get across that when Rishi Sunak says everything's fine, we've turned a corner, that is so disrespectful for people who are struggling. That really means something to me, because I do know what it's like to struggle, and to see people going backwards in life through no fault of their own, that makes me angry.
Do you think you're finally clicking? It's finally clicking for you on camera now and in public?
Well, look, all I'm doing is really reflecting on the experiences that I've had, but I've made no secret of the fact that I much prefer to be talking to people across the country about the lives they're living than, swanning around in Parliament. That's me.